So we have covered a great deal within this module. And before we dive in and go look at our scenarios, let's take a minute to look back at what we've covered. First of all, we introduced the IAM, or Identity and Access Management Service. And as a part of that, we reviewed the 3 different IAM identity types: users, groups, and roles. We then were able to go through the process and enable multi-factor authentication. And we did that after we went through and learned how to create IAM users and groups within IAM. And finally, we introduced Amazon Cognito, a service that enables us to configure aspects of AWS Access for our custom applications and our users within those applications. So now let's take a look at our 3 scenarios. And first, we had Sylvia, and she was trying to figure out how to manage the team's permissions. So what would you recommend for her? Well, in this case, using an IAM group would give her one location for setting permissions for every single member of the team. However, we do need to add a caveat here. We have the principle of least privilege access. We want to be sure that no one has access to more than what they need. So for the members of Sylvia's team, it totally makes sense to have an IAM group. But if she simply put all of her technical resources in a single group and gave them all admin access, that would not be following least privilege access. So we do need to use a group here, but we want to be sure we're not giving them more access than what they need. Next, we have Edward, and he has EC2 servers that need to have access to S3 buckets. And so he just created a user in IAM and then uploaded that access key and secret access key to the server directly. So is he following best practices? No, he's not following best practices here. And part of the reason I bring this scenario up is even this week I was working with the client and I had pretty much this exact scenario happen where I found out the client was creating a user for something and uploading that directly to the server. The solution here is to use an IAM role within EC2, because this mitigates much of the security risk as opposed to taking the approach that Edward is taking. So roles are around for just this reason, to give our services the ability to work with other services on AWS, but to have it happen in a secure way. So Edward should transition away from his approach and move to using an IAM role with specific permissions, in this case to access S3. Now finally, we have William, and he's leading the effort to transition his organization to the cloud, but he needs an extra level of security. So what approach would you recommend to William? Well, in this case, multi-factor authentication should be what they move towards. This is built into AWS, and because of that, it's something that should be relatively easy for them to implement. And it moves from the user simply having to just have a password, which obviously we know that passwords can be either hacked or they can be stolen from other services, and especially if users are using the same password on multiple sites, it can expose organizations to risk. But with multi-factor authentication, you have to be able to provide this other token to be able to log in. So this should give William the security that he needs.